Welcome back to the Agentic Insider. I'm your host, Phillip. In this show, we explore cutting-edge ideas and trends in AI and data, as well as hear from other industry thought leaders in the AI space. This podcast is brought to you by Iridius AI, committed to safe and responsible AI innovation. Let's dig in. Hi, welcome back to this week's edition of the Agentic Insider. Here with my co-host, Alistair Norris, the Chief Responsible AI Officer at Iridius. And also joining us today is my other favorite person in the company, our Chief Technical Officer, Peter Larsen. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Philip. Good morning.
So today we're going to be talking about, obviously, agents and everything agents. And so, Alistair, I know you're going to have lots of opinions on this. So what are some of the challenges that we've all, from your perspective, that the three of us have been challenged with and really come up with some interesting opinions and points of view on? Do you want to kick off with something around there?
Sure. I mean, I think really the biggest area for us to focus on today is to understand a little bit more about where organizations struggle. I think that, Peter, in your experience, there's a lot of different areas where organizations are struggling today, especially around agentic solutions, around governance, mitigation of bias, model transparency, even building the agents, running them, and trying to figure out the right way to be able to do this. So in your experience and from what you're seeing, what do you think most organizations are struggling with today? What are some of those areas?
Yeah, I think that everybody comes to work with some experience of, wow, this new thing, ChatGPT, I can ask it any question I want and get something intelligent back, right? And then you come into the company and all of a sudden you have to be compliant. All of a sudden you have to be controlled. So I think that many of the businesses that I've been talking to have a challenge in understanding how can they canalize the efforts of the AI to stay within the rails of what they dare to do, what is their focus as a business to do, and it also, what does it mean to run AI in my business? Okay, it's one thing to be having an interface to a chat GPT somewhere. That's really not tenable for many businesses, right? I don't want all my private information going to this outside thing. So what does it mean to have my enterprise be powered by AI? So there's an understanding and an embracing of the technology because of the fear of missing out. The efficiencies are real and will be realized, but they come with a fear of a loss of control. So I think that these two items of understanding the opportunity and then retaining control are the two biggest items.
I think you're right. And I think obviously from a compliance perspective, companies are very keen to make sure that they do not have people putting their own confidential information into a public-facing AI that it will then train itself on or learn about. And you find out that your competitors can ask all about your company because you were very kind to upload all the files. And I think that's one of those, there's a lot of areas that we're seeing with companies right now where shadow AI is happening, where organizations are saying you shouldn't use AI. We've blocked, all use of Gen AI is completely blocked. So that way we have complete control over this. And then what you find is, well, somebody in the marketing department has very kindly just decided to use it anyway to be able to help them out. And now what they're doing is they're doing it against company policy. So I think there's a desire for companies to close this down, and get more control over it, while at the same time they want to be able to take advantage of all of the technological, advancements that are there. So how do they think around that? What are the ways to be able to get past the, what you're talking about?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of elements in that. One of them is the market is still shaking out in terms of how can you actually get your AI in the first place, right? There are some large players that allow you and they give you basically freebies to tease you in, and then you're sort of hooked on this new drug. They are all not created equal, right? We had the DeepSeek upsetting the marketplace. And one of the other things I totally expect in the next year or maybe more, I know that there are startups right now who are making AIs that are much, much smaller for much more dedicated purposes, right? So the AI capability will play the scale of being a cloud service that is gigantic at one end, and something that runs in your device on the other end for a very, very bespoke purpose. So that's one way of getting it inside the firewall, for example. Another important part is using systems that are not dedicated to any particular AI intelligence, right? Something that can play the scale of devices and purposes. And this is why I feel very strongly that agents play a huge role, because they can actually play two different AIs against each other, have them kind of be better together and checking one against the other.
So give us a little bit of an understanding as to why there's value in that. I mean, from an agentic perspective, if you're using one model, it's the same as any other model, isn't it?
They really aren't, and they are. So some of the big models out there right now are sort of tuned to a consumer audience to a large extent, right? And they also trained on publicly available information, and you can argue about the degrees of how public the information was in the first place. But in fact, for my enterprise, it may be necessary to train it on my stuff that is secret to me and to my company. So there is a limit to how much an open and a public service can help you.
So let's talk about some analogs. I mean, Peter, you come out of large, large projects, and architecting some really large database migrations and everything else. Do you see some analogs here in the world of AI because I think most people in the audience will understand, data migration and everything, and those concepts. Are there analogs from there that you believe can teach us in this world that we're about to get into? And that world I'm referring to is, I think we all know that the acceleration of AI is just actually kicking off. It's going to be insane over the next several months, what's about to happen from what we see from our perspective. What do you see for some analogs?
Yeah, one of the things that strikes me is when I was migrating systems, migrating databases and cloud systems, I was struck by the lack of visibility into the value chains that the enterprises implemented already. They had grown over time. I worked with some very large companies that had systems in place that were crucial to running the business. They'd been running for 25 years and accumulating layers of sediments over that time. And the original designers were gone or dead. So systems of that nature, when you have to migrate them, you actually have to rediscover their purpose and all the layers of purpose inside of them. And I think that the AI transformation is going to both offer an opportunity for rediscovering those value chains and what impinges on them, and change them over time. So one of the things we have heard from some of our customers right now is that they not only want to take advantage of Gen AI to make things more efficient, but in fact, they want to, they can see the opportunity to actually have the Gen AI systems affect the way the company does their business. So it's not just about making a widget faster. It's about changing the way we produce widgets.
So you touched on an interesting point there. I think you're referring to existing, or sometimes you call legacy systems, right? Where, and when you're dealing in highly regulated industries, there are a lot of these systems that are still running that are decades old. I mean, we have spoken to clients who are still running COBOL systems as an example, right? And the agentic systems, from my perspective, that I'm seeing is that you can leverage these existing systems with agents as opposed to having to throw them out. Are you seeing the same?
That is definitely how I see it too, Philip. And one of the things I think is interesting with the way that the the notion of an agent is evolving, right? We have the co-pilots of the world that sort of focuses the agent conversation around a single purpose. It is my window into the AI in a single. I'm writing a document. I'm making an end of a month report or whatever I'm doing, and I'm getting some assistance from this personal friend of mine. Well, that personal friend can also be proxying a legacy system, right? The legacy systems are created, they might be a relational database. Relational databases are not the most friendly thing in the world. They're very efficient at storing the information and recombining it, but they are not necessarily friendly. So the agents can proxy not only people and channel people's vested interest, but they can also channel the intent behind this idiosyncratic implementation of, let's say, a database.
So what I'm hearing you say, perhaps, and maybe you're not saying, but from my perspective, that means that they could bring that data that they have in there, they might not realize has value to the business, that if they agentify those existing systems, they could extract even more value for the business, even from those legacy systems.
100%. And one of the reasons why that is true, I mean, there's multiple reasons why there's a lot of move to pour data into data lakes, right? We have sometimes more data about data than the actual data, and we pour that into a lake and we hope it's going to be useful later on. Well, how do we unlock that, right? So in my mind, I send off a team of agents into the data, and they scurry around and they look for oddities, they look for inconsistencies, they look for things that they tie back with the help of Gen AI, they tie it back to business value, back to the value chains. And then they come out every Friday. They've been scurrying all week. Every Friday they say, by the way, we found something interesting, right? And that sort of serendipity of spelunking around the data that has been generated by other systems for other reasons may create that either detect something that is really, really wrong, preventing good things from happening, or an opportunity we didn't know about before.
Did you just say spelunking around the data? Could you explain that to the audience, please?
So for example, we have talked to customers who use digital twins, right? Where the digital twin is essentially an avatar in the cloud that represent a thing in the real world. It gets measurements of temperature and velocity and so on, and it stores samples of those in the cloud. Well, maybe there is something systemic about the operation of my factory that it can be gleaned from comparing two values that our existing static algorithms don't already look at, that actually is vital to the operation. There could be a vibration sensor that is secondary or tertiary to what's actually going on, that may be a harbinger of an impending fault in the system, right? So these things can be discovered over time, and you can have the agent know about the way the data is structured, not knowing what its purpose is, but saying, oh, that's curious. There are time intervals where I'm not getting data. Oh, that's curious. There's a high correlation between these two data points. Why is that?
Yep. So it's bringing your data to life.
Exactly. So I want to riff a little bit on this. So it's interesting when you see a lot of people talk about agentic systems, they say you've got a relational database, you have an old legacy system, whatever it is, even if it was made last week, it's legacy now. And what you do is you stick an agent in front of this, and then all the agents talk together, and everything is suddenly wonderful because you've agentified your existing system. But it seems like from what you're talking about, this is going way beyond that. It's actually sending in agents to understand what's going on inside that data and interrogate it, so that it's more than just sticking an agent on the front of this to be a chatbot that could even talk to all the other agents, okay, in a language that makes sense. But ultimately, it goes beyond that to understanding intrinsically what that database was, or what that particular old legacy system was and how it worked, in order to be able to represent it better.
I think that's exactly right, and I think in many ways. And as my colleague Spencer will remind me, it's about people at the end of the day, right? And people problems transform themselves in this new Gen AI world, but sometimes it's the same problem. And one of the problems we create for ourselves in the enterprise is silos, right? We create silos implicitly when we have different specialists focusing on different things. Bridging the gap between the silos is something that the agents can do on our behalf. The database example is sort of doing that because we are the database is essentially collapsing a bunch of different silos into the one efficient engine that we had chosen to pay for. Well, we almost have to disaggregate the different purpose, the cross purposes that exist in that database in order to unlock new business scenarios or figure out untying a knot in the current process.
Sure. And I mean, I think from systems integrators, or always enjoy coming into companies and going, you've got all of these legacy silos or siloed systems, but all a siloed system is, in so many words, is a niche product that was built for a particular solution. There's nothing wrong with that. And in some cases, if you're able to, if you're building all of these niche solutions, as long as you're able to extract the data from them, then there's nothing wrong with having those silos. It's all about being able to understand what's in there and then make use of that data, as you were saying earlier, and try and find correlations between that and other data sets that they maybe haven't looked at before.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, specialists are it's an efficient model to have a mesh of specialists as long as the communication between the specialists can be efficient, right? And this is why I think the autonomous agents and personal assistant agents paradigm is a powerful one because it allows a local specialist to efficiently communicate with the right other specialist. And we have a mechanism for matching the two.
That's awesome. So one thing that I'm seeing, especially as we work primarily with enterprises and global enterprises, is that experience matters, right? And it's great that we're seeing all of this innovation matter, but there's risk, right? And AI, as we all know, we've all watched Terminator, we've all seen the negative things about AI and the dangers of AI, and the dangers of AI are very real. So tell us more about the experience that is required to really build out a true enterprise-grade agentic system.
Yeah, I think when we look around and see and look at companies in the AI world, right, they solve a lot of different problems, right? And there's a lot of brilliance out there, but the industry as a whole is currently at the tinkering stage, right? We are all excited about this new toy we got, and look what we can do with it. And what I think is missing from most of those solutions is making it a priority one to put you in control of the AI. As in other words, when the AI and its agentic customs are performing a task, you want to have your hand on the lever. You want to be able to put a human in the middle when necessary, and you want to imbue the system that you created with agents and the AIs with your values. And those values can be anything from standardization of values from some sort of industry imposed, but it can also be your values, right? We don't do this. Okay, so we are going to take steps to never do that.
Right. So that's a really interesting point. So it really comes down to entitlements and behaviors and everything else, which is going to be a whole separate topic for yet another podcast where we're going to be bringing a change management guru into the conversation to talk about this. But with one thing that I'm seeing is that, and I think we are all seeing at Iridius, is the industry is changing so darn fast. How do we stay ahead? And can we even stay ahead is the question. What's your opinion?
Well, I think actually fortuitously, our approach with agents that implement solutions is also at the same time a safety valve for change because we are localizing our innovation and the knowledge of particular legacy systems or a new cool toy inside of a single agent. And when you have thousands of those, changing one of them because of a new technology or a change in the business is no big deal. It is a very big deal to change your large enterprise application to roll with those punches. So by making smaller units of functionality in the agents and making them efficient and making them scale transparently, making them safe transparently, I think is the way to go.
Awesome. So I think what I'm also hearing is that enterprises can stay ahead of the so-called AI arms race, in the pace that's going on, by having an architecture that is eminently manageable. I think not only scalable but manageable as well, I think is what you're really talking about. Is that correct?
You don't want to be a victim to somebody else's business plan.
Yep. That's perfect way of saying that. Yeah, that's really great.
And I think, look, thinking about this, you're talking about, being able to take agents and unlock all of these silos as well. Models are changing all of the time. The way to build agents is changing all of the time. The technology is in constant flux. This experience really does matter. And I think that it matters not just because of what has come in the past, but how you can apply it to what's coming in the future and understand how to be able to adapt it.
Yes, no, I think that's true, and there's probably a whole other topic here that straddles what we can get out of the Gen AI today and the AIs in terms of answers and how we can essentially machine those answers to get predictable results. Because one of the things we are seeing, to your point, Alistair, is how the models come out in new revisions all the time, and you would like to think as a business that you're going to get the same results out of it, even though the model changes. And so we have to deal with this. And I think we have a strategy for extracting some of these nuggets that are specific to our business out of the models in order to apply them in a repeatable fashion.
So let's talk about agent life cycles for a while. So the idea of being able to create an agent, you spawn different versions of this agent, or you spawn clones of the agent to go off and do different particular things. Okay, we talk about sometimes about the idea to, these agents are dehydrated, you rehydrate them when you need to. They then go off and they spend your own money, they spend tokens, do things, and they dehydrate again. But after a while, as new models come out, the entire underpinning architecture of these agents will need to change. And so I guess the question is, how do you deal with this from a life cycle perspective, in making sure that the agents are always staying relevant and maybe improving features over time?
Yeah. No, I mean, the way that we've approached this problem is to take a firm stance in the existing scalability of the cloud infrastructures. How do they actually allow you to roll out software with new versions over time? So in particular, if your runtime environment is in containers, there are established methods for retiring the previous version and introducing the next version, and it is it interleaves with the notion of having many more agents than you need at any one time. So this is one of the other circles we're squaring, that as we cook functionality down into individual agents that maybe they're talking to a large language model, maybe they're not talking, they are just adding two numbers together, right? There are different kinds of agents, but these agents are used at different times. And both the ability to roll off an older version and roll in the version that you need right now, they are all part and parcel of our strategy as we roll this out in the cloud. And we basically envision some enterprises needing millions of collaborating agents and millions of concurrently running agents, let alone the fact that there might have been older versions that gets into the tens and the hundreds of millions. And we can do that very, very efficiently with all the existing cloud providers.
And so, we're talking a lot about, from an agent life cycle and millions of agents. And from that perspective, the one thing the Iridius we talk about is the need for safe and responsible AI. And it's interesting that nobody is, as I always say, is running towards compliance, going, give me more of that. That's what I really need in my life. But there is a need to be able to know that the AI is is doing things the right way. It has the entitlements, as we were talking about earlier. It has the ethics built into it, and it has it built in during the life cycle. So when you update the models, it doesn't go off the rails again. So why do you think that so many organizations right now aren't really looking at responsible AI as a business critical function, and they're mostly looking at it as a nice to have?
Yeah, I think that we have there's social change going on with this new technology introduction, right? And there is an adoption in people's minds, right? This is not just a technology problem. So I think that there is going to be societal pressure to harness this new superpower. It's going to be way more impactful than the looms and other industrial revolutions, right? And it's just, I think it's a lagging thing. It's not for, it's just not, there's an arms race, I suppose, that is more urgent to the business leaders at the moment, where they need to wrap their minds around the capability, and they need to maybe not be first, but be there too. Yeah, and what we are saying is that as long as you do it in a regimented way, you can have your safety too. You don't have to give up your safety as you're running fast.
Sure. And I think you were talking about, millions of agents, which may be mind blowing to some people listening. And I think this comes back to, years and years ago, Disney made a movie about the Mickey Mouse doing the Sorcerer's Apprentice, where he read a book he wasn't supposed to, and then suddenly everything started multiplying and duplicating, and it was going out of control. So how do you keep control over a system, at a high level, so people can understand it? So it's that when you have millions and millions of agents, and you're not suddenly at 2 million, 4 million, 8 million, 16 million, and it never ends.
That's a great point. I mean, and everybody knows the sort of the nightmare scenario of the paper clips, the just producing more paper clips, right? What I think we take a lesson, and we sort of dig back into humanity all the time as technical people in Iridius. We say if something worked between people, it might work between agents, right? And so if you imagine that your agentic solution mirrors the way we organize people, then you're not all the way far off, because then you can have agents with different perspectives, right? You can have a manager agent that's not only in charge of doing a task efficiently, but also doing it the right way for the right reasons.
So when I hear you and Alistair riff on this, I keep coming back to in my head about mechanisms, right? And where a mechanism where you've got process, you've got automation, and then the big one is adoption, right? So I keep coming back to the change management issue, and getting things adopted. And in our discussion with Spencer, your colleague, our colleague, you know, he quite rightly says not everything should be agentified, not everything is an AI solution. In your mind, how can we help our audience think in terms of mechanisms?
Yeah, no, this is interesting. I haven't thought about it exactly the way you're saying it. I do believe that mechanisms are, I think, for most people, except for developers, right? Developers are attacking the mechanism head on. They have X-ray vision into how the mechanism works. They live and breathe algorithms for
Mhm.
for manipulating things. And I think that in a world of agents, we are abstracting from how the mechanism works, and we are saying we can now talk about what the objective of the mechanism is. And we can talk about collective objectives between individual mechanisms. And we can express ourselves in regular human language when we state our goals, and we can have a mechanism assemble the mechanisms just in time.
So basically, what you're saying is AI behavior as a mechanism.
Well, AIs are essentially a compression of existing human knowledge. It doesn't have all knowledge, but it has a lot of knowledge, right? And especially a lot of the stuff that we call common sense pervade every industry and every part of the internet, which it was typically trained on, right? So there's a lot of the mechanism that is common sense, the awareness of gravity and how things work, that is sort of assumed by people, and some of those assumptions we are translating into this to the mechanism.
So let's take a little bit of a switch and talk about developers here, because as I understand it, and as many people out there who are looking at new agentic systems, we can take a role and apply it to Gen AI and ask it to be a marketing coach, to be a fitness coach for my home. I want to lose some weight. How can I do that? Help me prepare a meal plan, and also develop this software for me. So people who are not developers can ask AI to go off and develop them. And as new models get better, it might be, if you have a 20-year experienced developer, maybe one of the models is 70% as good as that. Then it becomes 80% as good, then 90% as good. And suddenly we're at 178% as good as a 20-year experienced developer. So surely we're getting towards a point where we don't even need to actually have developers anymore, or the development job that people were doing over the years is going to fundamentally change.
I think it's more the latter. I don't think that the developer role is going away, but there's a lot of developer roles today that are going to change fundamentally, right? There are people out there who today their only role was to make the next version of the UI come to life. I used to work at
Sure.
Amazon, where we have many user interfaces, and there were people whose only role it was to maintain that user interface, right? Those roles are, sad to say, going to change fundamentally, because the notion of what the system does and how that manifests in the user interface becomes more of an integral thing. So we are able to today, as we internally develop our product, we are able to create applications in hours that I know for a fact would have taken another team weeks or months to do in the past. So that's a huge compression in terms of, and also in terms of the cost, right? What is the risk of spending an hour to create a new version of this application versus spending a few months on it, right? It is night and day. So the developer, I think, as we internally realize how this is going to affect developers, I think there's going to be a fork in the road. We are going to unleash citizens developers in a way where we're democratizing the ability for an individual subject matter expert to express themselves precisely in their language and get something done without the need for a developer. And then there's another track where a developer will be the one who says, yes, but since you wanted to do that thing 1,000 times, you did it very inefficiently. I'm going to fix that. Or you created a security loophole. I'm going to fix that, right? So there is a need for debugging. There's a need for the details over there, but it's not the same number of people who take that track.
So really, we're talking about two different things. Or you're saying, first of all, there's definitely a democratization of development where it's going to be open to more business users to be able to talk to a system and say what they want, and it will be able to build it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to build it in a scalable way. It doesn't mean that it's not going to necessarily take advantage of all of the best ways of being able to do things, unless you were to prompt and tell it to do that. And so if you want it to be able to work really well in an enterprise and integrate with everything else that's going on, you're going to need developers with experience who know how to be able to build those particular pieces in and to guide it so that it's able to be a good corporate citizen inside an enterprise and do the work in the right way.
Yeah, but and I also think that it is the responsibility of companies like Iridius to essentially push some of the magic into the wall socket, right? We want to have a nice dividing line between the subject matter expert and their needs and the system and its needs. And to the extent that we can say, as long as you develop on a platform that has been created for safe and responsible AI and scaling with the enterprise, you don't have to worry about efficiency. You don't have to worry as much about safety because it's part of the wall socket.
Right. So I want to just, we're running, into this conversation about AI applications. We call them solutions, AI solutions. Can you maybe explain what the difference between an AI solution and an agent is? Because there's a lot of confusion out there, I think, in terms of what people are talking about.
Yeah, I think we have realized the value in having agents that are rather specialized come together in collaborations, and those collaborations are solutions. And what they solve is not just a particular thing for a user. It's not just the co-pilot scenario. It is cross-cutting in the organization. It's a connecting marketing to procurement, to engineering, in all these workflows that happen between normal people anyway. That is a solution. So when you say I want to improve the time it takes for me to react to my customer's complaint and improve the process, right? That is something that I couldn't do on my own in the past, but now I can, if I can express it in a sentence saying, hey, it would be really cool if this person over here in that role had access to the following information in a timely manner. You can make those cross-organizational solutions much faster for implementation rather than have to say, oh, I have to go down and find $100,000 for a vendor product to be instituted in my infrastructure to now also do this thing that I'm talking about. So we can reduce from envisioning just detection of a problem or noticing an opportunity to implementation. We can shorten that time.
That's awesome. Well, Peter, thank you so much for your time today. It's been, as always, a pleasure talking with you. I get to talk to you almost every day, so every opportunity I get, I absolutely relish our time together and value our time together. So I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your incredibly busy schedule to chat with us and our audience today. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
This was fun.
Excellent. So, and keep following us. And thank you so much for everybody listening to this episode. That's a wrap on this week's episode of the Agentic Insider. Thank you for listening. For show notes and more, please visit agenticinsider.show. To learn more about Iridius, visit iridius.ai. We'll see you next time.